displayed on the screen in front of you. Some of the presentations during the event will be uploaded at the CSIS Global Dialogue website. Furthermore, this event can be accessed through our live streaming service via CSIS Indonesia YouTube channel. Ladies and gentlemen, the executive dialogue session for the day, entitled Asia, Facing Automation and Artificial Intelligence, Impacts on Work, Business, and Society. Please welcome the moderator of this session, Professor Jesman Simanjuntak, Chairman of the Board of CSIS Indonesia and Rector of Universitas Prasetya Mulia. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, friends, distinguished guests. Don't get tired talking about artificial intelligence because it's going to be with us at a greater and greater intensity from now on. First, food for thought before food for our body. And we are very honored today to have our longtime friends, Victor Fung of Fung Group from Hong Kong. He was a very loyal attendee of all PCC task forces and conferences. And we are very happy to have you back. And Narong Chai was really very happy today to meet Victor again. We have requested him to talk about Asia facing automation and artificial intelligence, impacts on work, business, and society. Some were worried about losing jobs because of artificial intelligence, but not me. Even if AI eats up all the jobs, we still have something to do, and that is to play around. After all, we are homo ludens in the first place. And Victor, of course, can structure his speech because we are at a very critical stage of development. On the one hand, we have technology progress, opening up everything, allowing us to move around more freely and at greater speed and at lower cost. But on the other hand, what we accomplish through technology progress can easily be undermined by policy failure. And we are right in the middle of it with the trade conflict between US and China today. Everybody has been feeling the negative impacts of this conflict. And Victor Fung is right in the middle of it. He is practitioner in the sense coming from real sector, but also, as I alluded to, he is active in intellectual endeavors like the one we have today. And without further ado, please welcome Victor Fung.
Thank you very much, Jesman, for that very kind introduction. It's a great pleasure for me to be back in Jakarta today. This is really one of my favorite countries, and I have been away for a few years now, far too long, given the developments of Indonesia and Jakarta. And I'm so glad to be back here today and to really see so many old friends and to be a guest of CSIS and PEC again. Of course, myself and my brother William, our family have been associated with PEC for decades. I think I was very active in PEC more than 30 years ago, and I remain very committed to PEC. And my brother, I think, was chairman of PEC during a period maybe 20-some years ago. So this is very much a part of us and very much in our heart. So I'm very happy to be here. Now, I've been asked to really speak about business response to the rise of technology and the onset of the digital economy. So let me just say at the outset that I think both PEC and CSIS are absolutely right, absolutely on the mark in choosing to focus on this topic. The rapid rise of technology in all its forms, automation, digitalization, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, are an enormous opportunity for developing Asia and the entire developing world. I'm sure that you have seen already discussed some of the potential technologies in the sessions during this meeting. I understand yesterday was really a very exciting day with our very beloved Sophia from Hong Kong. I hope she made a good entrance. And I think as well as in your daily lives, I'm sure, as you get around town via Grab and Gojek, which are quite interesting studies for ourselves also from afar. Technology helps us to allocate resources, boost safety and efficiency, and deliver more and more services, all the way from education and healthcare to financial and professional services. Deliver services from where it's most needed to where it's available to where it's most needed. And moreover, with technology, being a latecomer to the game doesn't necessarily mean that you will be left behind. I like to really make that point. Being late in the game doesn't necessarily mean that you will be left behind. We can use the experience of the developed world in managing technology to our own advantage and to leapfrog and problem solve without making all the first mover errors. Now, I'll say a little bit more about this later on. And I think, I don't want us to get the feeling that, if others are ahead of you, you're now sort of gone or forever left behind. So there's a lot of promise. At the same time, the rise of technology and especially artificial intelligence does pose challenges to our traditional notions of work, business, and economic development. I would like to use my remarks today. Okay, can everybody hear me? I thought I had a big voice anyway. I would like to use my remarks today to share with you some of the opportunities and challenges that I see, drawing on my own experience with the phone group and our experience really with what Gisman has just mentioned, global supply chains. And I will suggest how we can use the power of collaboration and coordination within society at multiple levels to shape the impact of technology in the ways that we want and need, to how to make technology work for us. And we already know that technology can be a great growth driver, but our challenge is to ensure that growth is inclusive and sustainable, that it shares prosperity rather than concentrating it. And I think, in my view, one of the most important problems that we need to address in the world today is really the whole question of equitable growth and the large discrepancies between rich and poor. Now, it has been 6.5 decades since the onset of the computer revolution, 4.5 decades since the invention of the microprocessor, and 2.5 decades since the internet arrived. Importantly, for developing Asia, the key connectivity technologies to build networks based on IoT, the Internet of Things, and have really transformed industries. And because the technology, in a sense, have become inexpensive enough to be truly global and universal. So that's one of the things that really, in my mind, is very good news. We used to talk about the digital divide, remember that, years ago? And the developing economies, how they're going to catch up, they can't afford the technology. But the technology has been driven down, down, and down to so available. Now, I think the level, the playing field has been leveled from the hardware standpoint. That's not really a big factor anymore. It's really focusing on the use of the technology and the software today that probably will actually distinguish the winners. So we are beginning to experience this at the phone group, which, as some of you may know, we operate globally supply chains for consumer goods in over 50 countries around the world. And the theme that we have used to be we source in the East and we sell in the West, right? We source from Asia and we sell in Europe and America. Today, our theme is very much changing to source everywhere and sell everywhere. If we source in China, we're going to sell a lot of the goods inside China. And frankly, believe it or not, we're beginning to source from France and ship it all the way to Asia and to China because it commands a premium. So it's now really, the supply chains actually used to be simplistic. It's all moving in one direction, right? Source in the East, sell in the West. And the containers, you remember, would come back empty, right? It's already moving the goods only in one direction. Now I think we're talking about much more complex global supply chains. So 8 years ago, Mark Andreessen, the founder of Salesforce, said that software is eating the world. And frankly, he's not far off the mark. Today, everyone in our industry, the retailers, the brands, etc., are in a race to capture more of the sales from e-commerce, to put every product online, to digitize and track their products, and to drive more business from the data generated using technologies like RFID, sensors, AR and VR, virtual imaging, and cloud platforms, and so on. Today's retailers have dozens of seasons during the year, and even though Paris, New York, and Milan fashion weeks are still physically taking place, the virtual catwalks, the catwalks that are completely virtual and digital, has also come into its own. And this is a rapid-fire, cost-effective way to bring ideas to life in 24 to 48 hours. So the cycle from idea to product is now not months, okay? Not weeks, not months. It's actually days. And that is really a major, major change. The new demands of retailers have transformed life from the back end, where we really, at the phone group, really operate, across factories all over the developing world. Today's apparel and consumer goods manufacturers are under pressure to produce faster and in smaller quantities. The whole thing is about speed of response and what we call low MOQs, minimum order quantities, for every style. The total quantities may in fact be increasing, but it's split into a large number of small lots. And everything must be produced not only cost effectively, but also sustainably. And this is really important as never before. And digitalization, automation technologies are also their salvo, especially in China, where there are labor shortages in some areas. Although robotic sewing machines are not yet at the point where they can be operated independently, there are a range of digitalization technologies based on tablets and smartphones and RFID sensors and so on, which are helping highly labor-intensive factories to use IoT to become more productive, efficient, and cleaner. These simple technologies can be grafted into current operations piece by piece, and that's a very important point, meaning that the factories can take digitization at their own speed and educate their workers as they go along and do the capacity building on a gradual basis. So I like to just emphasize this point, because it's not like one day everything's labor intensive and then all of a sudden you have a totally automated factory and you don't know where to press the button. The technology actually could be implemented piecemeal into different parts of the production line step by step, which means you have an opportunity to catch up in terms of training your workers and so on, and actually move up the technology scale step by step and not have a step jump. And I think sometimes that point is not emphasized enough, we being at the cutting edge know that this is happening, and this is a very important aspect. We're experiencing this in our own operations. In fact, about an hour due south of here, one of our beauty factories, a company called Miomi, we have a manufacturing plant in southern Jakarta, and we have workers that used to perform manual filling and capping operations. Many beauties are actually filling and capping, totally labor intensive. And now, step by step, in the process that I just described, they really today begin to run machines by dashboards and so on in a step-by-step basis. Now, inside the phone group's supply chain operations, we are using virtual imaging and sampling to cut production development times from 10 to 20 weeks, which is normal. Now we're cutting that to days, okay, from weeks to days, and enabling us to deliver a collection to the store in as little as 4 weeks. So from the time of order to the time of delivery in store, we're talking about 3 to 4 weeks' time. You know, I grew up in the business. People used to ask me, if I gave you an order, how long would it take? I always say 3 months, because anything from Asia would take you 3 months. You know, it's almost regardless of where you do it or what the product is. Now we're really cutting it down to a much shorter period of time. In fact, our initial studies found that going digital produces a speed gain of about 45%, cost savings of 69%, and importantly, reduced environmental impact by 55% compared to the traditional processes that we used to run. This is surveys over 10,000 suppliers that we have in 50 countries. And that's the type of improvement and savings that we're generating. And it also enables retailers to make really better forecasts and ensure that they have the right goods in the right place at the right time according to consumer demand and trends. Because in the world now, the consumer trends are shifting so fast, the speed of response and the fact that the market is becoming fragmented more and more into niche markets. You basically need fast response and low MOQs to actually satisfy those market demands. So with more and more data from digitized product libraries, we will be able to predict what will sell according to algorithms based on thousands of data points, including sell-through data, product attributes, weather, social media, and so on. Decisions will be made using data, and everything will be a lot more transparent, both to consumers as well as stakeholders along the entire supply chain. It could be very empowering for everyone. In short, the supply chain of the future, which we're trying to build, will be completely digital, connected at each point from raw material suppliers in one geography to the consumer in the other side of the world in other geographies. So completely interconnected. It will be flexible and agile and a lot more sustainable. And it will be run by true knowledge-based organizations where decisions are guided by data and the insight that open data could generate. So this is the promise. This is the promise. And this is what we've been working towards now for a number of years, and we're really progressing very nicely towards that. Now, however, if technology holds lots of promise for industry, there is also a social impact that is already becoming very apparent. When factories use automation technologies, they can produce the same volume with fewer workers. The International Labour Organization, the ILO, and others have already estimated that much of our manufacturing workforce in developing Asia are vulnerable to these impacts of automation. In fact, I'd like to just cite one quick example. We've been investing in a company called ShopX. In fact, we're a major investor now in India that have developed a very good methodology to actually help the small shopkeepers deliver products to the consumer. You know, not to really, in a sense, integrate the whole market, but to enable, use technology to enable the small shopkeepers. And we literally then serve hundreds of thousands of small and medium-sized companies. It's quite unbelievable. I was just told this morning, I'd like to share this with you, that, you know, a year ago, this company was doing about 40 million, it was a startup, 40 million, GMV. Today, it's doing about 700 million GMV in 1 year. But importantly, it uses 180 people. And the scaling up from 40 million to 700 million, okay? Actually, we use the same number of people. Obviously, it's completely technologically oriented. So in this story, there's a good news and bad news. The good news is, wow, you can do all that and you can scale so fast. The bad news is, frankly, if I think about my traditional, to do a 700 million GMV business, you need thousands of people. That's the business I used to run, and I know. But 180 people, I mean, basically, once you got the technology right and you've invested in the fixed costs, the incremental cost of scaling up is almost zero. That's really what this example illustrates. And in fact, one of the things that I'm trying to do in this trip is we're now hoping to bring this concept that will enable the small and medium-sized enterprises with technology to Indonesia with our experience in India. So I think that's actually a very good example. Now, so if we actually move on, even as much as our experience shows the challenges of implementing technology in the developing world, I also believe that we have a broad range of opportunities to mitigate the most severe impacts of technology while boosting up its positive sides. We in business will need to work with policymakers and other stakeholders in society to make this happen. So I've been asked to address this issue. So this, in my mind, is a big opportunity for developing Asia, as we have few of the legacies of industrial age policies. For example, fairly antiquated social schemes, etc. We are going straight from agrarian to early industrial to digital. It's actually almost a jump. We have the chance to get the foundation in place and work together to shape the economy that we want. Now, this is actually something that I like to just pause a moment and just share with you. Because the way the technology have come so fast and the cost of the hardware have dropped so dramatically, we actually have a chance now to really make a jump. So the fact that other people have started before us, I don't think really matters that much. We can actually learn from the experience of the developed economies on how they, and frankly, not make the same mistakes and move up to the edge much more quickly. In fact, in China, they talk about something called the advantage of starting late. Now, you've got to think about this. The advantage of starting late is really how you actually use that experience to actually leapfrog. And I think that's the type of thinking that we need to have. But we cannot leapfrog completely thinking about the good things and into the future without thinking about the side effects and hopefully design a system which is not only productive from a business efficiency standpoint, but also from a society standpoint that mitigates some of the negative aspects of technology. So I have just a few thoughts to share with you on how we can think about this from the business sector, working together with NGOs and working together with government to think about some of these issues. The first area that I would like to think about is education in two respects. In primary and secondary levels, our education system, even in the wealthier parts of Asia, are great at teaching students to pass tests and recite facts. I think that's probably true of every education system that I'm aware of, especially in Asia. But it is not doing enough to stimulate creative innovation and critical thinking. So we are focused on enabling students to get the right answer rather than enabling them to ask the right questions. Now, this really, to me, is just two different thoughts. It's one thing to be able to actually give you the right answer. The other is to be able to stimulate the creative thinking so that you can ask the right questions. So today, I have to say, computers are getting better and better, and they will probably be better than the human being in getting the answer, in quotes. Okay, you can just ask Google. You Google whatever it is, there's a lot of facts that will come out. But if we look at people like MIT researcher Brinhofson, he talks about AI and machine learning world. It is still humans who will need to know what questions to ask. We need employees who can be reflective and critical enough to be able to ask the right questions. In fact, my friends at MIT tell me that today, if you pit a machine against a human being, pure machine and pure human being, the machine will win. As you can see in playing chess and in playing Go and so on, the best experts in the world cannot actually beat the machines. However, at the top of the tree is still the man-machine system. It's the human being combined with the machine on how you use the machine to enable the decision-making. That combination is still on top of the food chain. Nothing can beat that man-machine system. So that is really where we're going. In fact, at MIT, they tell me they don't use artificial intelligence. It's augmented intelligence. It's how you use the machine to help the human being. And I think that is really where we're going. And the critical thing is the human being knows how to ask the right questions. Whereas the machine is better than you over time, especially to provide the answers. So you don't try to memorize the answers or even to provide the answers yourself, because you will not be as effective or efficient as the machine, but you ask the right questions. Now, the other side of education, I mentioned there are two respects, is what I would call lifelong learning. Companies today are adopting cultures of continuous learning. And while much of this can take place within our own organizations, we need partnerships with public sector, particularly for those employees whose jobs may be disintermediated by technology. The issue is how to enable that culture of learning across society and our employees to move seamlessly from job to job. It is really a matter of training. Learning will be a key tool to support societies dealing with job transitions. Here, I'd just like to mention two things very quickly. Today, I think the competitiveness of an organization is really how fast an organization can learn. It's not about assets, not even about human assets that you have in a company. Because the environment is changing so fast, the real competitiveness is really in how well and how fast you can learn and internalize what is really happening in the world. I think it's the learning organization that's going to beat out. The other thing I'd like to just say very quickly is there's the long-term debate about impact of technology on jobs. So from a sort of economist and a technology sort of standpoint, I think you got to say that there really breaks down into two issues, right? The first issue is, will the new technology create more jobs than the technology destroys? Is there a net increase in jobs? That's the first debate, right? And I think I am fairly comfortable that there is enough arguments now about the ability of technology to create new jobs that I think we can win that argument. We can, I think, with innovation and so on, create enough new jobs to be more than the jobs that we destroy. Even that was a long debate for a long time. Some people don't think that's possible, but now I'm convinced. However, you have to face the second issue. Let's say you win the first debate. There are more new jobs created than old jobs that you destroy. The question then is, how do you get the people that were trained in the old jobs enough skill set to take the new jobs? There, I think the issue is much, much more serious. I think we need a massive revolution in learning. How do you retrain literally billions of workers that the jobs taken away in the old jobs? There are the new jobs here, but how do you get them over there to take the new jobs? That's the real challenge. So I think breaking the problem into those two parts really allows us to conceptualize. Let's, on the one hand, try our best to create the new jobs with the new technology. and there's a lot going on that. But then the other is we need a massive revolution in learning to actually retrain and keep on retraining the workers so that they can actually be able to handle the new environment. And I see that as the major challenge. Now, the second area that I would like to target for public-private collaboration to look at this issue is on how to build an economy that embraces startup culture and innovation. This would look at things like how easy it is to start a business, how transparent the whole processes are, and how easy it is to get financing, and how to eradicate different bureaucratic things that would prevent new businesses from trading, and especially trading across borders. Here, I think it's even more critical, actually, when we start looking at services and that area and how we create services across border, because I think that will be one of the major areas that I don't think the international system can handle too easily. There's one more issue which I like to bring up, which we encounter in our own company, and I'm sure we all encounter. Almost everywhere that you go in Asia, there is a culture. The culture is that you don't tolerate failure. Once you fail, you're sort of stigmatized for your career. Okay, yeah, I'm finishing. Yeah. Once you fail once, so you really need to now change the whole culture, which I think is quite is special to Asia. Almost every Asian culture I know of are very conservative, don't want to actually have failure. And if you don't do that, you actually now are restraining yourself from a lot of new things that you might try. In fact, in Silicon Valley, if they have a new startup, they look at a resume and ask how many times has this guy failed. Because the idea is that you learn from failure. And unless you fail several times, you may not be a very good CEO for this new venture. So somehow, I think that cultural aspect to me is one of the biggest stumbling blocks to actually introducing a culture of innovation in Asian countries. Okay, finally, just to wrap up, the third area where business and government can collaborate is data. I won't elaborate too much on this, but what we really need is clarity, harmony, and attention on data and its regulation, especially across borders. And this is a rather technical area, but for the business world, it's actually crucial. How do we actually enable this and still at the sharing and opening of data, and at the same time protecting confidentiality and et cetera. So it's how to actually enable this and still stay on the end course. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to really talk a little bit about some of the opportunities and really some of the challenges that we see from the business world in actually looking at and adopting this new technology. But don't get me wrong, I'm a techie, so from my education and so on. So I am a complete component of technology and thrilled to see that how it's taking root and how digitalization of the old global supply chains into the supply chains of the future is taking place. I can't help but capture all that new potential to solve some age-old problems. But however, in doing so, I think it's important for society and to come up with due care and collaboration so that technology could end up really helping the development of society and not exacerbating existing inequalities. And that is really a most crucial issue and really disrupting people's lives in ways that we do not intend. So, and I remain, at the end of the day, hopeful that the potential solutions are becoming clearer and clearer. Let's embrace the idea of change and remain confident in our individual capacities to influence others by our own example. So our collective challenge, as far as I can see, is how we can start taking some of those steps today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Victor. I think just one point that I particularly I find interesting. AI can be better than us in finding answers, but questions will still have to be raised by us, by human being. That's one. Number two, it's going to be augmented intelligence rather than human intelligence versus artificial intelligence. Number three, revolution in education, training, re-education, retraining to enable people to catch up with development in technologies. And he used the word massive revolution, and I agree with him. Education will have to go through a massive revolution to be able to catch up with what is emerging and progressing in the world of technologies. Let me invite questions from the floor, and I would love to also listen to questions raised by our millennials. Please raise your hand, introduce yourselves very briefly, and be succinct in your question. Please, who is going to start? Or we are supposed to raise questions rather than robots, please.
The chairman could raise questions.
We have Slidos. We have here what you advise. Would you advise the youths of today to follow traditional career paths, climbing the corporate ladder, or should they try to innovate by creating startups? Or career rather than startup, please.
Maybe you asked the wrong guy. Absolutely in startups. I can tell you, these traditional corporate ladders are no longer as long and stable as they used to be. You know, there is no such thing as, you know, being in one company and really sort of making yourself up the ladder, because the ladder is going to change very rapidly and will be swept away. And so you have no choice, frankly, but to actually keep on thinking what's going to happen in your career. So you might as well be creative and start something new. And like I said, there's always the idea of using technology to create new opportunities is still the frontier. You know, I've said the debate is pretty much won in my mind, that you do have a net increase in jobs, but somebody has to find them, and somebody has to make it an important business success. And that also would create innovation and a career path for people to do startups and so on.
Thank you. A little advertisement. We at Prasetya Mulia University adheres to what we call collaborative learning by enterprising. We primarily educate our students to become entrepreneurs rather than career people. But can I extend this question a little?
Sure.
What is it that people like your good self can advise to management of education institution as well as to students what to do to be best prepared to become entrepreneur?
Okay. Well, let me start off, Jisman, with an anecdote, which I like to share with the group. My golfing partner, as I was putting the ball, always wanted to disturb me, right? He wants to take some money off me. And asked me, why do you think kindergarten is called kindergarten? You know, the K to 12, kindergarten to 12, is one of the most universal education concepts in the world. You know, you go to America, it's K to 12. You go to China, it's K to 12. You go to UK, it's K to 12. You know, kindergarten comes from the German word, right? Kindergarten. And you know the K to 12 system was invented by Bismarck in 1865 or something like that. And it was admirably effective in converting country boys, you know, farming boys, into the military-industrial complex. Now, is that what we really want to do today? And has the world changed today? Why is it still K to 12? I just posed that question. So that was good. Now, I think the whole issue today has to be how fast you learn and how adaptive you are. And I think the idea of interactive learning is really the key. Also, the idea of lifetime learning. I've been told by many deans of business schools that the MBA is under a lot of pressure, going to universities and so on. Why? Because as an individual, if I want to invest 2 years in learning, I sure as hell don't want to spend it all at one go. I will take 6 months every 6 years, right, in my career, because the world is changing so much. So even if I spend 2 years, I want to split into pieces. So you know, if I want to spend more time, of course, you do better. But so I'm saying, you know, what is the rationale when it's such a fast-changing world to spend 2 years of your life at that point in time? I'll also grant you, you'll be at the cutting edge at that point in time. But in 6 years from then, you're gone. You've got to learn all over again. So that is really the real issue, I think, in the learning. So I think it's interactive learning. And I can tell you, companies, in looking at what really matters in their long-term competitiveness is how fast the organization learns and can change. That would impact its survival, it impacts effectiveness. So it's all about effective learning. Yeah, fast learning.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps also exposure, Victor. Seeing parents doing business all the time also creates a strong propensity to become a businessman. Second question, we are a country of diversity. Is it liability or an asset in pushing forward an entrepreneurial society?
Diversity.
Diversity.
Yeah, of course, it's essential. You know, I always think if everybody in the same room look the same, think the same, I think it's very hard to be creative. It's almost impossible. How do you get real creativity is knocking together things that are as diverse as possible. And that's how the sparks fly and you create new ideas. So I look for the largest number of diversity, put them all together, stir them up, and let it knock against each other, and that's where new ideas come. If we all look the same and from same background, dress the same, think the same, I can assure you there will be no creativity. So diversity is essential to creativity.
If we are all the same, then things we do would be incestuous.
Yeah.
Recycling waste. We produce waste every day. Computer waste, etc. What is it that you can say about this? In taking this as opportunity rather than liability.
I didn't quite get the...
Yeah. As in cities, we produce a lot of waste.
Oh, the waste.
It's not only garbage, but also used machines, etc. It can be a good business opportunity also, please.
Well, I certainly think it is a huge business opportunity, the recycling of waste. We're doing a number of things. If you look at major cities, I think getting rid of the garbage is going to be a major problem. And we all know that the use of plastics and inorganic materials will just make the problem worse and worse. So how you come up with ways to actually turn garbage into something that is like producing clean energy, I think is going to be one of the major areas where people will look for a lot of creativity. For example, you could use high temperature to melt this, sort of the, sort of and using that actually as a way to generate electricity, for example. So I do think in our business, for example, the people are now very, the consumers are very onto this idea of don't waste things. And the shared economy, the circular economy is becoming a very important aspect. So what we do, for example, one of the initiatives I can share with you is when you go to a garment factory, about 10% of the fabric, after the cutting, so it end up on the floor. There's about 10% wastage. How you can actually systematically gather that back up and reprocess it and do new fabric from it, and you sell that new garments with the new fabric from the waste, I can tell you, we can command a premium in the market because it really appeals to people that feel that we don't want to kind of really waste things, and much more in the shared economy and the circular economy. That appeals to the new consumer. So if you can systematically do things like that, it would actually not only give you a profit opportunity, but also do something good for the world.
Thank you, Victor. One more from the Slido, one more question. During technology transition, some workers will be released. What are they supposed to do during the transition?
Well, that is really the idea that I mentioned. Somehow, I think the employers, the workers themselves, and government have to work together to actually give the workers a new opportunity in terms of retraining for the new jobs that are appearing. I don't think the answer, frankly, is to stop the jobs from disappearing. I think that actually is not realistic, and that will actually be problematic over time. So you've got to allow the world to progress, but you've got to really provide safety net for people who lose their job to be retrained. And I think that's why I say you need a massive revolution in retraining and learning. And that way, you're not only making the worker personally more productive and more able to make a better living in the new world that provides the new jobs, but for society as a whole, you're actually capacity building all the time and really reinventing yourself at all times. But I have to say it's easier said than done. Many companies have tried it. People are naturally reluctant to change their habits. They don't necessarily say, you want me to operate that machine? You got to be kidding. I'm used to doing this my whole life. So I think somehow we've got to actually come up with both the societal culture change and incentives to actually make those changes. And that's why I think we need to have new ways to inspire and incentivize people. So that's part of this revolution that I'm talking about in learning.
Thank you. It's good to hear that. Marie will be the last.
This is too good of an opportunity to have Victor here not to ask this question. As we know, there is a US-China trade war going on, and I'm sure it's affecting your business as a large trading company. So I just wanted to know how you see it, how it's affecting you, and I guess most importantly, how should we be looking at it into the future, near future, in terms of especially what will we need to do in trade and investment policies, regional agreements, WTO, and there is a technology angle in there as well. So it's kind of a question related to a current issue, but how do we actually move forward and deal with this issue and not be just bogged down with, because we don't know where it's going kind of attitude. Thank you.
Wow, Maria, I was hoping that one might not ask this question. I was trying to take a rest from this. I'll try and give you the 2-minute version as opposed to the 2-hour version. The effect of unilateral imposition of duties by one country and then the responses and so on is absolutely bad for the trading world. That goes without saying, and I don't really need to go there. I think as a whole, I think we're really not producing a larger total economic pie. What I'd like to focus on actually is something that you may not expect. There's always a silver lining in any catastrophe. This is a catastrophe, what's happening in the trade war. So I won't dwell on the downside. Let me look at, there is a silver lining. And I think that silver lining goes as follows. If you look at the world from afar, the biggest trade corridor in the world is between China and the US, right? And what effectively you're doing now is to interrupt that and cut that. So what do you think is going to happen to the trade flows? They're all going to just go around it. Basically, trade will still flow, but you cannot go this way. You've got to go more indirect. So what we really see now is a total rearrangement of the global supply chains. And now I think it's a new search for country of origin, if that's the right way to put it. For those of us who've been around a long time, we remember the MFA, the multi-fiber arrangement, and the textile quota era. This is almost like a new textile quota era where you're actually looking for legitimate and ways to actually do the finishing in new country and get country of origin, which unfortunately cannot be China. You can use a lot of components from China. The total value add in any product could still be a large proportion from China or any one country. But the finishing, and you've got to do according to the rules on the country of origin. So the first reaction, everybody, oh, you can't finish in China, let's go to Vietnam. And then Vietnam, I can assure you, we're the largest exporter of textile from Vietnam. It's full. Prices are going up 10, 15%. So, okay, so Vietnam is full. Where do we go next? We go to Bangladesh. And then Bangladesh is full. Maybe Indonesia would be a recipient, or maybe India. And then we are looking as far as Egypt, where we've been very active before. We're now thinking, hey, this may be the place. The place you look for, the place to go, is based on a number of factors. Obviously, you need the skill set, you need the labor, you need the land, etc. However, you also need to now worry about the geopolitical assessment. You may not want to go to a country that will be subject to these, duties sometime in the future. So the movement is not now determined by negotiation, as in the textile quota era. It's based on your assessment of the geopolitical situation. So there's a tremendous now rearrangement, and frankly, that spells opportunity. It really says that now there may be an opportunity for some of the production to now move to different parts of the world. And in fact, if I can go back again to an old concept that our generation just been talked a lot about, the flying geese concept. Remember that? How the Japanese came up with the flying geese? The production, when it got too expensive in West, moved to Japan. When it got too expensive in Japan, moved to the four little dragons of Asia, and so on. But have you noticed that for a long time now, when China became the factory of the world, that whole thing stopped. Because China became like, the place to go, and everything went into China and stopped. China then actually went from the coastal China to the interior of China. But you know what's happening now because of the trade war, and this is the silver lining in many ways, is actually it's now coming back out from China. And you know something? The flying geese model will continue. We're back on the flying geese after maybe a 10-year interruption. And I think we're seeing a new wave of globalization. Now that, by the way, you know, is also totally in line with Chinese government policy. Because for 10 years now, and those of us who've had many meetings in China, they really are looking at opportunities not to continue to do the final stage, what China would consider lower value added things, and actually, and really perhaps allow that to go to other countries, but move upstream to work on components and so on. So it's totally in line. When Mr. Wang Yang came to be governor of Guangdong province, he had coined the phrase of emptying the bird in the cage. But that was never completed, or it was actually moved. But guess what? The trade war has now completed that process. And now we're seeing, I think, a new wave of globalization. And we can truly think about that part of the supply chain, which the finishing, which will be very important to many least developed countries, for them to actually now create opportunities to actually benefit from this. So what I see now is perhaps another wave of globalization where SMEs from China and other more developed areas would actually move out to other parts of the region. They will go to new countries, you know, in Africa, even Ethiopia and others. What they'll do locally is to build factories, train local workers, create exports, create foreign exchange. And so I see that new wave of globalization, which may in fact be not really that bad. In fact, it would be very important for the more inclusive growth that we all are worried about. That the rich and poor now beginning to actually now even out more over time. The important thing is that as we do this new wave of globalization, we've got to remember to make it sustainable and inclusive. So Marie, that's a relatively long answer to your question, but I always look for a silver lining.
Thank you, Victor. Our time is up. Just one comment. Politicians can have war among themselves, but business people always find ways of doing things in their own way. And number two, Victor, don't forget Indonesia. If Chinese business people plan to go out there, please whisper to them, there is Indonesia in the south. And thank you very much for the insights. I hope that Fung Group will be doing better and better. You have served the region very well. Now, the entire world, yeah, source in the whole world and sell to the whole world. We wish you the best in doing that. By doing so, I think you also serve humanity. Thank you very much. Let's give a very big applause to our old friend, Victor Fung. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor and Mr. Victor Fung, for the fruitful dialogue. I would like to invite Professor Simanjuntak to give a token of appreciation for Mr. Victor Fung and have a photo session together afterwards. Photographers, you may take your place. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to inform that lunch will be served at Timor Room right through the back doors of this ballroom. For VIP guests, please enjoy your lunch at the Banda B Room near the conference stage. Please refer to our organizers for further assistance. Please be informed that the next session will begin promptly at 13:50 at this exact place. Please enjoy your lunch and refreshments served. Thank you. We will start the next session at 13:50 because Minister Sri Mulyani is shortly delayed. I will repeat, Minister Sri Mulyani is shortly delayed and the session will start at 2 p.m. So please come back at 13:50 to the exact place. Thank you.